Good day, everyone. We are the group of researchers from grade 12 Makiling. I am Cyndy, Jade, Buen, together with my co-researcher, Jovic Besin, Josheart Legarte, Cassandra Larin, and Hana Piamonte. We are here to present our study entitled The Correlation Between Screen Time Spent in Online Classes and Physical Health Complications. Exposure to screen devices is one of the continuing concerns of today's age. According to Scripps, people usually spend an average of 10 hours per day in front of their devices. Along with the benefits it has been providing, Lynch said that digitalization has negatively impacted the physical health of people. Technology has made people become more dependent on digital devices, which takes away the practice of physical activities such as walking and playing outside. And now, with the breakthrough of online learning amid COVID-19 pandemic, students tend to spend more time with their gadgets. In the study conducted by Chilumudi and his associates, the time spent by students on digital screens has significantly increased during the onset of lockdowns and virtual classes. This might lead to overexposure to digital screens, which makes them vulnerable to several health risks.
One common effect of prolonged screen time is eye complications. According to Bruce, blue light from the screen devices leads to eye strain. One study in Taiwan found that learning programs requiring more screen time increased the likelihood of nearsightedness among children. There is also the risk of physical inactivity, which leads to obesity since students sit in a stationary position for an extended period. The lack of physical activity and exposure to sunlight could also lead to calcium and vitamin D deficiencies, which could prompt injuries. Other physical complications include finger pain, back pain, neck pain, and sleep problems. Concerning the present issue, this has prompted the researchers to conduct a study on the relationship between time spent in digital screens during online classes and the number of physical health complications experienced by students.
Three research problems were considered as toward the objectives we focused on in conducting the study. First, the relationship between the hours of sleep of students and their number of physical health complications. Then, the relationship between the average time spent on gadgets of students and their number of physical health complications. And lastly, the relationship between the average time spent on online classes of students and their number of physical health complications, all of which are to be answered in the later part of the study.
As shown in the paradigm, the input box contains the profile of the respondents, which are the students from Calamba City Science Integrated School, who are studying through an online learning modality in the school year 2021 to 2022. The throughput box contains the processes applied by the researchers in the study. This includes conducting a survey through Google Forms and collecting data such as the students' names, grade level, average screen time per day, and the number of physical health complications they have experienced since the start of the school year. And finally, the output box contains the study's outcome, which is the relationship between the time spent with the screen devices during online learning and the number of physical health complications experienced by the students.
For students, the results of this study will help them have the initiative to alter their habits on their gadget use. Teachers may modify their teaching methods depending on the study's conclusion so that the students could have less dependency on screen time. This would also help the parents to have an idea of the sources of their children's problems and give them better guidance.
This study only sought to assess the relationship between the screen time spent by the students in an online class and their physical health. The researchers will only obtain and analyze the respondents' screen time and the total number of physical health complications they have experienced since the start of classes. Moreover, this study will not encompass any outside factors, such as family issues and mental well-being.
This study used a correlational research design that provides explanations for the relationship of variables, which are the screen time spent by students for online classes and their number of physical health complications. Moreover, using a snowball sampling, 294 students of different grade levels from Calamba City Science Integrated School participated in this study.
To start the data collection, a questionnaire through Google form was distributed to students, and later on they were asked to disseminate them to their classmates. The first part of the questionnaire contains questions about the sleep time and gadget use of the students. For the second part, it contains questions about the physical health complications experienced by the students. And lastly, for the third part, it contains questions related to the eyesight of the students. Afterwards, Pearson's correlation was used to analyze and interpret the collected data. This treatment is used to determine how strong or how weak the relationship is between the variables, with the values ranging from -1 to +1.
Figure 1 shows a total of 63.3%, or 186 out of 294 students have an average sleeping time of less than the standard of 8 to 10 hours of sleep during the past weeks of online classes. It implies that the breakthrough of online learning, which causes more screen time, has an impact on the sleep deprivation of students. Meanwhile, Figure 2 indicates a total of 98.99%, or 291 out of 294 students have spent time with their devices more than the recommended maximum screen time of 2 hours for teens, with 10.60 hours being the mean.
Then, Figure 3 shows a total of 98.30%, or 289 out of 294 students have spent time with their gadgets for online learning more than the recommended maximum screen time of 2 hours, with a mean of 8.83 hours. It implies that almost 83.30% of the mean of the daily average gadget use by student, which equates to 10.60 hours, is spent on online learning. Next, Figure 4 shows the scatter plot chart between the hours of the sleep of students and their number of physical health complications. Using Pearson's correlation coefficient, the findings show an R value of -0.18, which indicates no or negligible relationship between the variables being tested.
Moving on, Figure 5 shows the scatter plot chart between the hours spent on gadgets of students and their number of physical health complications. Using the same treatment, the findings show an R value of 0.22, which indicates a weak positive relationship between the variables being tested. To determine if the linear relationship of the sample is strong enough to predict outcomes in the population correlation, t-test was used. The calculated t-value is 3.8538, which resulted in a p-value of 0.0001. This shows that the p-value is less than the significance level of 0.05. It implies that there is sufficient evidence to conclude that there is a significant linear relationship between the two variables. This means that the regression line can be used to model the relationship between the hours spent on gadgets of students and their number of physical health complications in the population.
Figure 6 shows the scatter plot chart between the hours spent on online classes of students and their number of physical health complications. The findings show an R value of 0.19, which indicates no or negligible relationship between the variables being tested. Hence, this implies that there is a negligible relationship between the hours spent on online classes of students and their number of physical health complications.
Lastly, this graph shows that 62 students were diagnosed with astigmatism, 72 with nearsightedness, and 9 with farsightedness. Meanwhile, 135 students have not yet visited an eye doctor. This implied the prevalence of common eye disorders among students working in an online learning environment. Thus, this indicates that there is a link between the amount of time spent in e-learning and the students' physical problems, predominantly their eyesight.
Here are the conclusions based on the findings of the study. There is a negligible relationship between the hours of sleep of students and their number of physical health complications. There is a weak positive relationship between the hours spent on gadgets of the students and their number of physical health complications. And there is a negligible relationship between the hours spent on online classes of the students and their number of physical health complications.
In light of these, the following recommendations are strongly presented. The findings of this study suggest that educational authorities should provide specific interventions addressing the time spent of students on their gadgets. Next, it should be noted that this study only shows the number of physical complications experienced by the students. For this reason, the extent of how students experience each physical complication may differ from one another. Thus, further study regarding the degree of each complication on students is recommended. Lastly, this study only utilized 9 underlying physical health complications related to prolonged exposure to devices based on past studies. Thus, the researchers highly recommend future studies to include a wider scope of health complications linked to screen time. That ends our presentation. Again, this is our study, the correlation between screen time spent in online classes and physical health complications. Thank you for your time and attention.